this tidal wave of horror that washed over the world at the weekend as millions more documents from the so-called Epstein Files finally saw the light of day, although some containing absolutely hideous allegations against Donald Trump disappeared almost as quickly as they appeared. Make of that what you will. Where do you begin on a morning like this? Do you begin with the news that a man who was the de facto, or the husband of a man who was the de facto Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was accepting tens of thousands of pounds from a character who, at the time, had already been convicted of sex trafficking? And this is the point that I think gets overlooked, is that the original conviction doesn't seem to have touched the sides of people's concerns or willingness to be associated with him. Your newspaper, if you take one, will also, or your internet news service, will also feature quite a lot of pictures of Peter Mandelson in his pants. Whose life is ever likely to be enriched by images of Peter Mandelson in his pants? And also, to make very brief light of what is a deadly serious subject, who still wears Y-fronts? Don't at me. That is not a Yeah, go on then. Who still wears Y-fronts? 0345 6060 973. That was a joke. Please don't ring in to tell me that you still... I'll put you straight on to Keith if you're ringing in to tell me that you still wear Y-fronts. You're not getting on the radio. So... the de facto Deputy Prime Minister under Gordon Brown. I don't know, and we may never know, but it seems to me possible that Peter Mandelson was unaware of the extent of his husband's financial dealings with Jeffrey Epstein, but he wasn't aware of his own dealings and his own social dealings, all sorts of allegations swimming around. And then you have Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, as he chooses to call himself, facing a new legal threat, the Daily Mail reports, after a second woman alleged that Epstein flew her to Britain for sex. This is in addition to the Epstein revelations, which feature him lying on top of an apparently rather young woman on the floor of what appears to be Jeffrey Epstein's New York apartment. And then you have revelations or accusations, allegations about Bill Gates, about, you name them, they're in it. The rich and the powerful. And men. Always men. If, like me, and it's been a desperately unfashionable position to pursue in the UK media in recent years, but if you find yourself equally disgusted by sex abusers, irrespective of their ethnicity or religion, if you are as disgusted by the behaviour of Jeffrey Epstein and his mates as you are by the grooming gangs that have a large makeup in many cases of people, men with Pakistani heritage, then you'll be waiting to see what all of the people who've used Pakistani, or as they prefer to call them often, Muslim grooming gangs, and indeed attacking the United Kingdom. It'd be very interesting to see how high the horse is that they climb up onto today. Imagine inviting Elon Musk, who's all over the Epstein Files, despite claiming that he had nothing to do with the man, inviting himself to parties and expressing a deep desire to get involved in some serious socialising. Imagine inviting him to comment at your rally, ostensibly to protect British women and girls, when these people were consorting with a man whose own conviction for sex trafficking was well established. And I feel quite naive on mornings like this. Do you know what I mean by that? I think it's probably male privilege, actually. I was talking about this with some friends last night, and we've all got daughters, and dads don't really know. Until Me Too came along, dads didn't really know what it was like to be a woman. I saw something online the other day, and it was supposed to be a joke. Like, so what would you do if you were a man for a day? And you're supposed to make a joke about sort of, sexy things, or, I don't know, football or something. And this amazing woman, I wish I could remember who it was. You'll probably find it. She just said I'd go out at night. I'd go out on my own at night. What would you do if you were a man for the day? I'd go out on my own at night. We were talking about this last night, and all of the women around the table were like, yeah, absolutely. And the men were a little bit, oh yeah, of course. That took a while. Always men. Always men. And of course, one of the only people to be held to account for these activities. A woman, Ghislaine Maxwell, was dealing essentially exclusively with men on Epstein's Island and elsewhere. So I'm thinking of naivety and venality, naive about the venality of it all. When we first talked about grooming gangs in the north of England, and unlike many people who've made an awful lot of money from pretending to care about the victims, and indeed even bringing some of the prosecution cases very close to collapse due to contempt of court. We've been covering this since Andrew Norfolk first started writing about it in the Times in 2011, and one of the earliest questions I asked must sound very naive. What's the correct word to use? One of the earliest questions I asked was about the group dynamic of it, because I know, I've always understood that individuals do terrible things, but if somebody invited you to join in, I'm going to sound pathetic now, I used to think you'd call the police. So we did it a bit, possibly looking back unfairly, focusing upon whether or not there was something in the geographical diaspora from particularly poor parts of the subcontinent that explained why, if your mate was grooming a 15-year-old girl and invited you to join in, you wouldn't phone the police, you'd actually contemplate joining in. But now we learn that you can be an extremely rich and powerful man who is grooming young girls. And when you invite your mates to join in, they don't phone the police. They hop on a plane and come to join you. Who didn't know, honestly, what Epstein was like? Do you think there's a sort of human hierarchy here, that these people actually think of themselves as just better, whether because they're rich and powerful or because they're men or because whatever the reason may be, they just think they're better. Therefore, these children, these young women are just not, they don't have agency. They have, what do they have? They just have, they're there to serve. Don't laugh, please. So I don't mean it in a light-hearted way, but I was thinking about Henry VIII again last night. I'm not fascinated by the way that we were taught. It's not so much the same today, but we were taught that this guy was like a cross between, John Bull and Julius Caesar, the British equivalent. And he was a syphilitic psychopath who killed his wives when they didn't do his bidding. You think of religion as a yoke, a straitjacket that's used to keep the population in its place. It's what Karl Marx was talking about when he talked about religion being the opiate of the people. The promise of heaven means that we'll put up with penury and poverty, deprivation and exploitation in this world because we get our rewards in the next world. What was Henry VIII's attitude to religion when he wasn't getting his own way? Just abolished it. Just literally cut off all links with the Catholic Church and started his own, like a sort of mad cult leader. Oh, I'll be the head of the church now. Never mind God or the Pope or whatever it may be. And these people bring a kind of sociopathic sense of superiority to the world that we still don't properly, because either you feel it or you don't. Are they all narcissistic? Are they all paedophilic? Are they all psychopathic? Are they all? I don't know. But I just never understood the bit where they tell you what, look at Giselle Pellicot, that hideous story in France. I mean, even that is easier to understand in some ways because they met on websites that were dedicated to perversion. Jeffrey Epstein is knocking about with bankers and you know who's photographed in these files with what appear to be very young women sitting on their knees, one on Epstein's knee. The bloke who has directed the Melania Trump film that nobody has seen yet, except journalists, as far as I can tell. He's literally there. He was a big feature in the Me Too movement. They're looking around for someone to direct a movie about Melania Trump, and they happen upon this guy who's all over the Epstein Files. Do you see what I mean about the size and the scale of it being too big to process? Find me one celebrity who's committed one crime and I'll find you an uninterrupted array of front pages all dedicated to it. They've gone today mostly for the Andrew Windsor angle, the male and the mirror, the right and the left, the yin and the yang, if you like, of the popular press in this country, both going in on the new a woman coming forward to accuse Andrew, and it's Epstein adjacent, of course. Epstein is the man accused of arranging this visit, but it's not Epstein Files, the story. But they're not quite sure where to go with that. Is it Mandelson? The Mandelson story. Absolutely extraordinary that a senior politician of any hue, but in this case a Labour politician, who perhaps, again, naively, you think might be a little less likely to subscribe to the notion of human hierarchy. They're supposed to believe in equality. That line he said years ago about being supremely comfortable with extremely rich people or whatever it was takes on a slightly different hue now. How naive do I sound when I say to you, do you know, I'm not sure I realised that being rich and powerful provided you with so much impunity. You know, remember when that woman in America talked about the taxes being for the little people just before she got sent to jail? I think her name was Leonora Helmsley. And I remember thinking, but surely the law, I'm such a child, such a sweet summer child, thinking, but the law applies equally to everybody. Let's look at cases in this country. You line up incredibly expensive lawyers on your defence side, and you are much more likely not to be convicted than you are if you're relying on legal aid, or if you have, the local high street solicitor punching way above their weight. It's obvious. The richer you are, the wealthier you are, the more powerful you are, the less you seem to think that normal rules, both moral and legal, should apply to you. Even like motoring offences, if you've got the money to hire anyway. I don't know how much of it you've seen. I don't know how much of it you've followed. I don't know how much of it you can bear. It is inexplicably hideous, all of it. The photographs, the allegations, the police reports that were not followed up, the incredible absence of concern for these young women, which again has parallels with the scandals that we've had in this country, because there's a sort of subtext of consent, isn't there? There's a subtext of, well, they didn't mind, they went along with it, which is what the police often said in the cases of the grooming gang scandals that we've seen in this country. So and Fergie, as she still calls herself, Sarah Ferguson. Emails appear to show Epstein wanted her to release a statement saying he was not a pedo. Again in March of 2011. It's not a shock to me that rich and powerful people have a vocabulary of their own. And it's not rich and powerful, is it? It's rich or powerful, because Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor doesn't bring wealth to the table. He brings influence and status. Epstein deals in both. He deals in money, he deals in humans, he deals in influence, and he deals in wealth and status. He's like a kind of, like a sort of Tolkien-style spider at the centre of a web that extends into almost every corner of Western society. Or at least into the almost every corner of the upper echelons of our shared societies. Why can't we see everything? That's the second question. And I'll take serious, I don't want conspiracy theories, but why can't we see everything? If they can redact people, as they have done, who are vulnerable or who are victims, why can't we see everything? Why can't we see every single mention of Donald Trump, for example, in the Epstein Files? How can somebody who appears in them hundreds and hundreds of times essentially be overseeing the process of what gets released and what doesn't? I am not, as you know, a conspiracy theorist. But it does seem an extraordinary coincidence that so many members of his high command were supremely comfortable in Epstein's company.